My name is Pedro Medina. My big year was. Allow me to set the stage. It all started here in Colombia in 1994. When Colombia was decertified, we were placed in a category of 7 countries: Iraq, Afghanistan, North Korea, Libya. We were part of the axis of evil. We were placed in that category by the State Department because basically our president had accepted drug money, or was reputed to have accepted drug money. And the whole country went into a crisis of confidence, which plummeted in 1999. In 1999, we woke up with a picture in the front page of all the Colombian newspapers, the 6th of January, which showed the empty seat. It was when the head of the guerrilla, Tiro Fijo, sure shot, stood up our president, Pastrana, in the middle of the jungle. They were supposed to be in conversations, in peace conversations, and he just didn't show up. That picture destroyed the dreams of most Colombians that we were going to finish that year, that century, that millennium of peace. That after a war of 40 or 50 years with the guerrilla, that we were going to finish that year in peace. The rest of that year was shattered dreams. And the rest of the year was also earthquakes. The 5th of January, earthquake in the coffee zone. And well, that was the only earthquake that year, literally, but the rest of the year was really complicated situation. We had 80% of the world's kidnappings occurred in Colombia that year. That year, 55% of the terrorist acts in the world occurred in Colombia. 165 bombings to the electric pipeline, 500 bombings to towns and to electric infrastructure. And just really, really a terrible situation. We had our best primas shot to death that year. That year, our economy plummeted. It was the only year in the Colombian economy that the economy has not grown since 1999. That year, 400,000 families, 1% of the population, made the decision to leave the country. There was a graffiti on the way to the airport that said, "We're the last one to leave. Please turn off the lights." What was I doing in those years? I was a business merchant partner for McDonald's. I was running the McDonald's business. I was the founder of McDonald's in Colombia. And I was a business strategy professor at the University of Los Angeles. And I found myself in a classroom with 39 students, and I asked them, "How many of you see yourself in 5 years in Colombia?" So, raise your hand. And I turned to the other 27 and said, "How about yourself?" And they said, "Well, tell us why you should stay in Colombia." And I said, "Well, the coffee and the emeralds and the two oceans and the flowers," and I couldn't think of anything else. And my professor was arguing and said, "No good." So I felt frustrated. I put together a research project, 18 months in 5 universities, specifically research the politics into Colombia. And we put together a talk which was called "¿Por qué creer en Colombia?" Why one should believe in Colombia. I started giving this talk, and this talk, initially it caused a lot of attention with people, but there was always a doubt in the people. Why is this person who's running company so visible as McDonald's dedicating time of himself and the company to do it? People thought I was hired by the U.S. Embassy, or I was an agent of the State Department, or something like that. People didn't understand what I was doing. Well, 6 months before that incident was happening, I found myself in a meeting with the IPO of young presidents of the Texas. So 8 of us, President Texas, President of the Big company, Fancy, 8 presidents of our company, and the subject of the retreat was, how do you avoid the Demon du Midi, the Middle Age crisis? Carlos Cortez, the president of Unisys, conducted the workshop, and all the questions revolve around the same thing. What makes you truly happy? Where is it that you're truly engaged? What would you do if they didn't pay you a cent? Where do you feel it flow? And for me, all the answers revolve around the same thing.
teaching, mentoring, being a change agent and catalyst, creating ideas, shocking people into reality. And I asked myself at that moment, what in the world am I doing selling hamburgers? That was 6 months before the incident in the classroom. During those 6 months, there was a big debate in my mind. Well, Pedro, you get paid very well, you have stock options, you have 2 cars, you have bodyguards, you have power, you have influence, you have all these things. You cannot just throw all that overboard. Plus, teaching, basically, I was making $25 an hour teaching at Los Andes University, so that wouldn't pay for 3 kids in private schools and for all, for the expenses that I had or that my family had. So, when I started giving the talk, I ran one. The first talk was powerful. It was, there's no second opportunity to make a good first impression. And the first talk, I was invited to give it in Maloca, which is a science center here in Bogota, with Nora Lisa Hoyos, who's the founder of this. She's a PhD from Yale, brilliant lady, and I gave it to young people in the dorm room of this place, a beautiful setting. And at the end of this talk, Nora Lisa Hoyos, the founder of Maloca, and the Minister of Foreign Trade, who I didn't know, came up and gave me a hug. And I thought, if this talk generates a hug from these 2 ladies who have done so much for the country, maybe there's something powerful here. 6 months later, I got a call from the secretary to the president of the country saying that there was a Millennium Board and that they wanted me to give the talk to the Millennium Board. And it was the founder of U.S. Air, the Cisneros, the president of Cisneros Group, the president of Cemex, 30 world-class business people, the whole cabinet. I went and gave that talk. And at the end of the talk, Gustavo Cisneros, one of the most influential people in Venezuela, stood up and said, "You know what? I travel through the entire world, and I have never seen anybody that speaks so negatively of their country, not only in their country, but abroad, than Colombians." That comment led to a whole discussion that whole afternoon about the importance of doing what I was doing. And I left that place with basically an unleashed spirit. I said, I've got something very powerful in my hands. I've got to push this. But I was running a U.S. company. People were distrustful. They didn't know why I was doing this. One day I ran into Mauricio Rodriguez, who was the head of Portafolio newspaper. He was part of the El Tiempo group, the most powerful newspaper group in Colombia. And I said, Mauricio, I'm really upset with El Tiempo. He said, why? I said, because how can it be that last Sunday, the day of spirituality, the day of family, the day of peace, how is it that you open the newspaper with such a headline? Mauricio said, Pedro, I was traveling, I didn't see it. What did it say? The headline said, half of the country is bankrupt. The news was that half of the municipalities in Colombia were technically bankrupt. Mauricio said, you know what, Pedro? You're right. We have a bunch of editors of the old guard that think that only bad news sells. I said, well, I have a powerful talk. Invite me and I'll give it to your editors. 2 weeks later, I was with them. And they were all very, very open, with the exception of one guy who was in the corner sitting like this, with his legs crossed and his arms crossed. And at the end of the talk, he raised his hand and he said, you know what, Mr. Medina? What you're saying is really true. But the reality is that we have so many bad news, so many times, that we don't have room for the good news. At that moment, all my blood from Antioquia and from Huila and from Santander just spurred up, and I said, you know what, when you make that decision, I make the decision not to open your lousy newspaper. And I left, and I got really scared. I said, tomorrow they're going to publish that the Corrales hamburgers are less fattening than the McDonald's hamburgers or something like that, and I'm going to have my sales affected. Well, the following day, there was nothing on the press, and then the following day, there was a news story, 5/8 of a page, very powerful, with a very powerful headline. It's this story. It said, where are we first? And they published it with our email address in the bottom. And this story generated a tipping point effect. I got 4,000 emails the first 10 months, the first 10 days. A Colombian lady in Azerbaijan wrote to me saying, Mr. Medina, I'm really sick and tired of everybody talking negatively of our country. Please send me all your material. This went from push to pull. That year, in 8 months, running McDonald's in 3 boards with 3 kids, teaching a class, involving a bunch of different activities, I gave that talk 256 times. Some days I would do it 5 and 6 times a day. And the talks range from all kinds of opportunities. One day the chief of police called me up and I gave a talk in front of 65,000 people in the streets in Barrio Kennedy in Bogota. And then we gave a talk to a banking convention, bankers from all over the world, and school groups, and business groups, and all kinds of venues. And some days it was 5 and 6 times a day, and it was my wife would tell me, last night you were giving the talk asleep. I would just repeat the talk, and it was, and that talk, which started that year, my big year, 2001, is now the talk that has been given more times to more people in the world, by more people in the world, in the history of Colombia. We have given that talk to 680,000 people in 159 cities in 29 countries, 5,300 times. I've trained 1,800 people to give the talk. Not all of them give the talk, but I've trained 1,800 people, all kinds of people, from 14-year-olds to 84-year-olds, from business presidents to students to beauty queens, all kinds of people. And this became the project for the rest of my life. Now we run a foundation, which is called Yo Creo en Colombia. We're starting a project, which is Yo Creo en America Latina, I believe in Latin America. And basically we do asset-based development. We develop contents, powerful contents, through which we engage Colombians and Latin Americans in thinking differently, in seeing ourselves in a different way, and in relating to our people in a different way. So it has to do with self-image, it has to do with social capital, and in telling our story in a different way, it has to do with marketing. My big year, 2001, powerful, started with a frustration. Listen to frustrations. Frustrations are powerful and persistent.